going to talk about a deadly threat to our country that will kill more people than car accidents this year alone. And more people than will die at the hands of terrorists, for sure. We're talking about gun violence, and we're very pleased to have with us today Nocera, who is an op-ed columnist with the New York Times, and Ed Rollins, who's a Republican, a veteran Republican strategist who's been an advisor to 4 presidents. We're going to start today talking about where we are right now on this issue, and then we're going to segue to what lies ahead, and in Ken Presents parlance, what's next. But first I'm going to start with you, Joe. When it comes to guns, it seems like we're schizophrenic in this country. On one hand, Americans are horrified by the death toll of 34,000 people a year who die, and they want universal background checks. And on the other hand, the recent Pew poll shows that people increasingly think that guns are the solution rather than the problem. How do you explain that?
Well, there's a couple of things that have happened. The first is that the gun advocates and their supporters in Congress have done a very good job of repositioning the way we think about the Second Amendment. And so the Second Amendment, which 30 years ago was not viewed as a serious impediment to gun control measures of one sort or another, has come to be now on the forefront, to the point where even people who are opposed to guns or who want to limit guns think about the primacy of the Second Amendment and have kind of accepted this definition of the Second Amendment that everyone has a right to own a gun, which, in my opinion, is not really what the Second Amendment says, but we can talk about that later. So that's point one. And the second thing that's happened is that efforts to limit gun possession have failed terribly over the course, I mean, especially since Newtown, when it has become so top of mind, and there have been so many mass killings since then, that while I don't necessarily think that, I'm not so sure about the accuracy of that Pew poll, I do think that more people are thinking, I need a gun to protect myself more than they used to. I would notice this in particular when the 2 prisoners in upstate New York broke out, and that is the kind of area that would tend to have a high gun ownership anyway. But as journalists were talking to people who were afraid that these guys would come to their homes, there was a lot of people who said, well, you know, I've got my gun, so I'm ready for them, and so I mean, I think that in the best of all I think people still would like to see a world in which there were more limits on the people who could get guns. But barring that, I think people are thinking, well, I got to do something.
Okay, well, let me just, I mean, because Ed, you've watched this issue for a long time. And after Newtown, which is, as you know, very close to here, 20 children, right. 6 adults gunned down in 10 minutes. And everybody goes, this time it's going to be different. Except my husband, who said, it's not going to be any different. And it looks like he was right. Can you explain that?
First of all, this is the most hot-button issue, single issue. This and abortion are the 2 hot-button single issues in the country, with very, very strong passions on both sides. I will take my Fifth Amendment. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, but I'm going to take the Fifth Amendment, not answer anybody, do I have any guns? Because I live in a New York apartment.
Okay.
So I have no unregistered, and I'm taking the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah.
I don't have any bullets. I don't shoot guns. I'm not a hunter. I'm not a fisherman. I'm not any of the rest of it. But I do believe that I have a right to have a gun. Right. The Supreme Court has said by a 5-4 decision, I do have a right to defend myself in my home with a gun if someone breaks in. Nobody breaks in. Very small portion. But it's a security issue. The problem today with guns in America, and you figure 30,000, about 11 or 12,000 of those are suicide. And that doesn't make the death any less, but the probability is just as high that they jump off a building, stick a knife in themselves, take medication. A gun is a simpler way of doing it. The problem I think we face as a country is that we basically have a lot of young people in which violence is projected more and more in games, video games, television, the whole 9 yards. And I think to a certain extent, you can go to almost any urban city. First of all, I lived in D.C. for 25 years. D.C. had the toughest gun laws in America. Basically had nothing but a very high crime rate, high murder rates. New York City had a tough laws, still had a high crime rate, still a high murder rate. So I don't think that in itself does it. I think we have a different culture. There's 310 million guns in America. People aren't going to give their guns up. It's very much a geography thing. A lot of people in urban areas don't want guns. People in the rural areas, south, what have you, are not about to give it up. Republicans on a 2-to-1 basis have more guns. But the critical point that you started on here, I thought when Sandy Hook occurred and some of these other things, which I was appalled, I said, now's the time Democrats are going to move this bill. They don't even touch it anymore. The NRA has so beat back the Congress that when I started in politics 30, 40 years ago, it was always a fight. It's no longer a fight. They basically just say, thank you very much. Certain cities put some restrictions there. But the issue, and I'm not advocating anything, I'm just simply trying to tell you what the facts of life are today when it comes to the gun lobby, or when it comes to the gun owners. They're not going to give it up. And a lot of people today, just as you're saying, now think because of the violence around, imagined or real or TV-wise or what have you, they want their gun. The gun sales rocket.
Okay.
But that's not why gun sales rocket. Gun sales rocketed because we elected a black president and people went crazy.
Bullshit.
That's not bullshit.
How many people in the audience agree with
bullshit.
that? Let's see hands. Agree with, because we elected a black president, that the number of guns has escalated in this country?
Who bought a gun? Anybody?
How many people?
Did anybody in this room buy a gun because we elected a black president?
No?
Okay.
The NRA and the gun lobby, have done a fantastic job of saying that this president wants to take our guns away. They've done a fantastic job.
Well, he has.
No, he hasn't. He's loose. The laws have loosened.
Well, hold
since
on.
he came into-
How has he done this?
By his rhetoric. I mean, I think that's the threat. He's not about to go introduce. He's not going to say to Nancy Pelosi or the Democrats, are you going to, I want some legislation, put legislation up there, be dead before the ink was dry. He has talked about it, though. He's talked about it repeatedly and what have you.
But go ahead, Joe.
First of all, I just want to take issue with some of the things you said. Number one, the idea that it's just as likely someone's going to commit suicide by a knife or jumping off a building as opposed to a gun is absolutely not true.
Okay, people only kill themselves because they have guns in their house?
That's a rhetorical question. The truth is that some of those people would kill themselves, and some of them, given the degree of difficulty of killing themselves if they don't have a gun, won't do it. They won't.
We don't know that. How do you know that?
Who said that's right? Somebody in
No, I mean, I think we're going to have an honest discussion here. I'm not advocating guns. I'm not advocating the Second Amendment. I'm going to tell you that a lady downstairs says we need to repeal the Second Amendment. I said, have at it. It's a big, major undertaking.
Nobody says you have to repeal the Second Amendment. And in fact, the 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court, which says that Americans have a right to their guns, also says, Scalia was very, very specific about saying this does not mean that some forms of gun regulations might not be appropriate and legal.
And I said that as I started this thing. I've lived in cities with gun regulations. That's not the issue. The issue about the Second Amendment, you can argue whether this is what it was intended or not. It's been in this Constitution since the beginning, and we are a society that basically has a lot of violence, not just because of guns. We have a lot of violence, and I would argue that we're now getting more and more in tune with people wanting more and more, and it's a cultural thing as much as anything else. You didn't grow up with guns. I didn't grow up with guns. I wasn't a hunter. I'm not a hunter today. But at the end of the day, people in certain parts of this country, you go 20 miles from right here, you basically have a very active group that would basically take you to the wall and fight for their guns.
Okay, but let me just. So you don't. Could I just get to the the culture awash in guns? Are you saying that you don't think the availability of guns and the escalation and the number of people who have guns and the number of guns?
No, that's not what I said. What I'm saying is that we have guns. It's illegal to have guns in the vast majority of this country. We have 310 million guns. We have guns all over the world today. We have more guns today around the world than we've ever had before.
But nobody approaches our death toll.
Nobody, because we live in a culture with more violence, and that's But
Japan lives in a culture with
it's
video
a
games.
It's a different mindset. It's like London. London doesn't have violence with guns because they don't have guns. So it's not just the matter you have guns, and I mean, the reality here, if you want to have a serious discussion about this, it's the old, is the criminal with the gun the person committed the crime, or is it because of the gun? At the end of the day, guns are available. The criminals bring cocaine, they bring everything in this country. What makes you think they wouldn't have guns, even if it was totally outlawed?
Okay, Joe, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I guess what I would say is that you can agree that Americans have the right to a gun, while at the same time taking measures that would make it more difficult for criminals, for the mentally ill, and for people who would be prone to violence, whose past history has shown a prone to violence, to make it more difficult for those people to get guns. That can be done.
I'd be totally supportive of that. Why wouldn't I be supportive?
I didn't say you wouldn't be.
But I'm just simply saying, when you try and put these kinds of things into existence, and there is a lot of that.
Okay.
It takes legislation. It takes city council.
Well,
it takes a state legislature. It takes a federal legislation. I'm just simply telling you that today, in this environment, in spite of this terrible tragedy here, there's no inclination of any legislative body to basically repeal guns or to restrict guns.
Okay,
which is not to say that we should stop trying to do something about it. Which is not to say you should repeal the Second Amendment. It's not going to happen. It's ridiculous.
That's my point.
Okay, can I just ask about that? We're talking about the players right now that factor into this whole scenario. And the American people, you've got Congress, you've called them spineless. President Obama hasn't exactly been a profile in courage on this issue. We have the NRA that's got 5 million members and a $300 million a year budget, yet seems to hold the whole issue hostage. Now, you spoke, weren't you a speaker at the NRA?
Sure, I've spoken at every group in the world, including this
one. Well, including them. What's the
it's a constituency group with 4.5 million people, most of whom vote for my party, and I'm not supposed to go talk to them?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm asking, Ed, is for your insights into how it's a relatively small.
4.5 million is not small. I'll give you an example. Let me tell you what happens in politics. I had a candidate who was a Republican leader in the state assembly, who was the only Republican elected statewide in California, other than Arnold Schwarzenegger in the last 10 years. He was the Secretary of State. He ran against Barbara Boxer. He basically was the guy who represented the ag areas. For 20 years, he was the assembly leader. He carried every bit of NRA legislation possible. He was their guy in the price, and he's now our example. Now, don't think that's not a loud example, and don't think they don't do this everywhere. They've got thousands of members, and NRA people were more upset about Bill Jones getting a D- than they were about Barbara Boxer, who never supported him.
Okay, but
they are a very powerful political constituency. They are single issue. They don't care about any of the rest of it. They are single issue. And that's a very powerful, you take 4.5 million people anywhere across the country, you can have a big impact both on money and people and what have you.
The key moment in the modern, in the past few years, was Joe Manchin sticking his neck out saying we should have a background check law, which of course we should. That doesn't deprive anybody who rightfully should have a gun from having a gun. It just doesn't. Joe Manchin, who is a gun owner, whose state, West Virginia, is gun country, basically said we should do something and back the background check law bill. It didn't pass. It did not get the 60 votes that it needed. Joe Manchin, at that moment, anybody who was like Joe Manchin, who thought maybe, they were gone. They were lost. And they're lost for now. Not necessarily forever, but for now, that's why after there's been one mass murder after another, not of that scale, that's why there's been no move in Congress or in the White House to do anything, because they saw that if you stuck your neck out, it wasn't going to get you anywhere. power because they only vote based on that.
People, could you, because a lot of people don't understand that. Who wants to explain that?
He's the expert, not me.
First of all, we get to write. I'm the junior varsity from Fox. He's the varsity team from the New York Times. I mean, I'm just kind of a minor player.
Don't give me the toe in the sand, Ed,
I'm not even a blonde girl that gets to talk on Fox all the time.
No.
I'm sort of like their viewers. I'm the old man that gets to be on every so often.
You're breaking
But I have
my
been around.
heart.
I would like to get to, I mean, what I would like to get to is what are the things that we could do?
Okay, well, could we just do, is anybody in the audience have a reaction to what you've heard so far? You want to stand up for me, please, ma'am?
Wow, this is like Oprah.
She was Oprah for a while.
Susan Rubenstein, there was a survey done among members of the NRA, I believe it was a year ago. 74% of them came out in favor of background checks. Now, this is a situation where the leaders of the NRA appear to be disagreeing with their membership, the vast number of members. And one of the things that I've always wondered about is with all of the anti-gun legislation, why don't they get some NRA members who go on, instead of Bloomberg, who's the mayor of New York, who's not going to be speaking to their group exactly, and get these people to talk about how important it is to have background checks, and then maybe Congress
I don't think
do
any.
something.
I certainly would applaud background checks everywhere. I'm not afraid of restrictions. I think just like if I have a young 20-year-old daughter, when she was 16, I wanted to get her license. There's restrictions on that. I didn't go out and buy her a Jaguar or anything like that. There's always some kind of restrictions on these freedoms. And I think to a certain extent, if you want to put, and as the court has said, if you want to put restrictions on guns, you have to do it through a legislative process. I'm simply telling you it's a difficult task to do it. And the federal government for the foreseeable future, I think, is not going to take anything up. And most places now, state legislatures, the other place, and Republicans have had big inroads in the state legislatures in the last two midterm elections. And you're just going to find no appetite out there today for any kind of. They may do the background checks because that's okay, and they may do some gun safety controls, but they're not going to take guns away.
Well,
the answer to your question is that any NRA member who did that would get the equivalent of the D-, a kind of public shaming. There's a really good example of this. There was a gun owner who agreed to sell personalized guns, which is a gun where only the owner could shoot it.
Is that a smart gun?
A smart gun.
Right.
And he got so much blowback and so fierce, and people were told to boycott his store, and he feared for his business that he actually did a YouTube video apologizing for having the temerity to want to sell a smart gun, and he stopped doing it. I mean, what I think Bloomberg should do really is buy a gun company and start selling smart guns. He's got the money to do it, and it's the only way you're going to get smart guns in the country is if somebody who just doesn't care what the NRA thinks is in control of the ability to manufacture a gun.
Okay, the only problem, he can buy a company and do whatever he wants to do. He's spending a fortune out there trying to basically educate people on guns. And there's a counter that's coming back. There's some very effective ads coming back against it. You could have all the factories in the world. If people don't want to buy the smart guns, they're not going to buy the smart guns.
That's true. But how do we know if they're going to want to buy it or not? Because they don't exist. Because even though the Germans have made them, and they're actually California has there's a
don't forget that a big part of the NRA is not just the 4.5 million members. It's gun companies who battle civil suits and all the rest of it. There's a big product element to this, and it's not, it's more hunting and that type than it is handguns. But handguns is a gigantic selling portion today, and it's my point again. I'm not an advocate for guns. I'm not a hunter. But I'm trying to tell you the reality of it today. And
you don't think it's going to change?
Oh, it's not going to change in my lifetime.
Okay, let me just ask the audience, because this illustrates.
We may change the president, and obviously that was a part of the problem, the people going out and buying guns because we elected the first African American. But I'm telling you that's not going to alter. I didn't say it. I was not the one that made the statement.
Are you speaking?
I was not.
Okay.
I was not the one that made the statement.
Okay, okay. How many people in this audience, when it comes to voting for a candidate, gun safety is the #1 issue? Raise your hand. The #1 issue that you choose a candidate based on? Nobody in this room. This is the notion of the single issue voter. For somebody who supports guns, that is the #1 thing, and they turn out to vote.
They do.
When they recalled those 2 legislators in Colorado who had made the laws tighter,
Right.
they interviewed a bunch of people, and everybody who wanted to keep those people hadn't voted. The people who wanted to get them out and supported the recall turned out to vote. So that's a big part of this problem at this point. You mentioned the smart guns. Explain what they are, Joe.
Well, there's just various ways. You can do it with fingerprints. There are guns that where you wear a wristwatch, or you have a wristwatch that is connected electronically to the gun that allows you to shoot it. But there are various ways where only the owner can use the gun. Now, there are various reasons why gun advocates don't like this. One of them is you can't sell the gun to your friend or give the gun to your friend, or but they would do a lot to. I mean, there's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't sell a smart gun, that's a violation of the Second Amendment. But it's become one of those many, many issues that
the NRA opposes.
That the Second Amendment absolutists view as a violation of their rights.
I would also predict, and again, I'm not an expert on guns, and I'm on this panel because I'm one of the few Republicans here. So
we love your candor,
thank
Ed.
You. It's the truth. When I got called 2 days ago, they said, "Go put you on with Joe on guns." I said, "I'm not a gun expert. I mean, my idea of guns control is do you hold it with one hand or two hands?"
You've been around to watch the. You've been around to watch the process,
I have
which
watched
is
the
also
process.
part of
I've
this
watched
conversation.
the process for a long
Right.
time.
Okay.
And I'm just telling you that there's less enthusiasm for gun control in this country in the last 10 years than there was 30 years ago when I started in this business. And the Democrats have rolled over and played dead. The Democrats were always the advocate. Hey, listen, I was in the White House when my president got killed, and a good friend of mine, Jim Brady, got badly wounded. And so I mean, I'm certainly sympathetic to the Brady movement and all the rest of it. There's been gigantic anti-gun movements. I'm just telling you, the counter, again, it's a single issue. The counter is much stronger than that. I mean, you look around this country, people talking about concealed weapons and all the rest of the stuff. It's just. But I also think part of the violence, and don't underestimate the fact that every play game today, every movie, it's all there.
Studies have shown that's not true, that's not a factor.
Then studies will show any kind of thing. But,
well, that's true.
So you think a kid sitting there every day basically going bang, 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 blowing heads off, that doesn't bother them at all?
There are other countries that have violent video games that haven't had this.
They don't have the guns. We have the guns. And we're not,
guns.
We're not taking our guns away. That's the issue.
We're not taking your guns away. Okay, anybody? All right, stand by.
If you want to take the guns away,
No.
go repeal, go get 3/4 of the states to repeal the Second Amendment. Lots of luck.
You want to stand up for me, please, and tell me your name?
Sure. My name's Judith Dobrinsky, and I don't disagree with anything either of you said, but, Ed, you are, so to speak, a hired gun.
I'm sorry, I am not a hired gun. I'm not getting a penny. I got a free cup of coffee and a free meal here.
Okay, yes,
and I've been on 3 panels.
What advice do you give to the other side? If you were hired by the anti-gun people, the people who want to control guns, how do we gather momentum and do we have to become
do
single-issue
campaigns
voters?
anymore for a living. And I don't work as a political consultant. But I've been around a lot of politics, and I know what the politics of it is. And the truth of the matter is you do it one at a time. You go into communities, you basically, I really thought after this terrible tragedy up here, you'd be full bore. I mean, do you even have...
Governor Malloy did tighten the gun laws up here. I mean, we have among the toughest gun restrictions in the country. Connecticut does.
And what about your congressional delegation, which is pretty much, do they go down and lead the charge? I mean,
All right. Stand by.
Okay.
All right, hold on, Frank. Let me get this.
So my name's Eric Roberts. I have a question, and it relates to the Newtown shooting. We were talking about it earlier. That case actually brings in a whole lot of different variables that affect the whole gun control versus right to bear arms issue. You had a mentally unstable individual who in need of counseling. You had guns not secured by the gun owner. You had potentially a liability of, unfortunately, the woman's dead, but potentially gross negligence in the form of, liability for putting the guns in the hand of someone who was unstable. Where do you think, where do the surveys show that dollars are best spent? Is it mental health? Is it reducing availability of guns? Or is it making people liable for putting the guns in the hands of someone who should not be
Probably all of the above. I mean, the truth of the matter is the vast majority of these kids that have gone in and blown up schools and the guys walking, now we have these terrorists that they're shooting up Army reserves and what have you. Most of them are mentally ill, or there's something wrong with them, and you've got to do a lot of due diligence. A lot of it's education, but it's my only point is I'm trying to give you what I see the facts of where the game is, and I think the mental health system in America has failed miserably for a variety of reasons. There's not anywhere near the resources that we need to identify this. Do parents ever basically say, I think I got a nut bar in the back room here who keeps playing with guns? Maybe someone needs to watch them, maybe needs to get a little psychiatric care. But every one of these cases, whether it's Virginia Tech or the one up here or what have you, it's a sick kid that does it.
But with all due respect, Ed, that's not what Joe, am I wrong about this? That there's a relatively small percentage of gun violence that is perpetrated by the mentally ill?
Well, that's a trick question, actually.
I don't mean it to be.
The number of mentally ill people who resort to violence and use guns is minimal. They're actually more often victim than predator. But it is also true that many of these incidents of mass shootings are perpetrated by people who have mental problems. And now you ask, how are the dollars best spent? I think that, I go back to the view that it would not be that difficult. It is not that difficult as a society to find ways to keep guns out of the hands of people who have shown to be prone to violence, to be prone to mental illness, and to have some sort of criminal background. You're not going to stop everybody, not with 310 million guns in the country. You're not, but you could, with a legitimate background check system, with a methodology for tracking where a gun came from, which gun shop it basically sells guns that wind up regularly in the hands of criminals. The way New York, it's not like, if you want a gun in New York, if you're a criminal and you want a gun in New York, somebody has to sell you contraband. And that contraband has to come from somewhere.
Usually Virginia.
Right, that's right. And if you could better track that, and there's a famous case in Milwaukee where there was a certain point where a Milwaukee gun dealer was like the number one seller of guns to criminals in the state. And at the time, they were allowed the Alcohol, Tobacco Gun Bureau, Firearm Bureau, was allowed to publish statistics showing, what percentage of guns that were involved in crimes came from this gun shop. And guess what? Once that became public, they stopped doing it. Then, by the way, in 2005, Congress passed a law that did not allow those numbers to be published anymore, and now we're back to normal.
Could we just stop there, because that's one of we're going to talk about solutions. Maybe this is because you've sort of opened the door to this. Why is it that gun dealers and gun manufacturers are not liable, civil liability, in the same way that people who make drugs, alcohol, even cigarettes, knives, chainsaws, ladders, all those companies have to show some sort of responsibility to the public good and the public health? Why are gun dealers and makers exempt?
Because laws have been passed that exempt them.
Same.
There was an effort to bring a class action suit against gun manufacturers, and and a law was passed that basically gave them an exemption.
So this
And more guns are made in Connecticut for a very long period of time.
That is true.
Now, there's one thing we've been trying to have an honest discussion all day, and I'm not saying this is an honest discussion either. What I'm saying is this is the best I can do. So much of the crime in America is black on black. Okay, there's no doubting those statistics, and let's be perfectly honest about it. It's not a bunch of you here going home shooting your neighbors. Not a bunch of just all crazy people. The vast majority of crime on crime is black on black. These 13, 14, 15-year-old kids in the public housing projects basically don't want to fight with fists or knives or anything anymore. You want to be a big man, you pull out your gun and you blow somebody away. Read the papers every day. Those are the crime statistics that are there. Now, you want to start tackling that thing? Going to go in the public housing and take all the guns away? It seems like we were trying to do that with the police department, and we got slapped back pretty good here. So my sense is, it's nice to have all the rhetoric. Let's do all this good stuff. But are we worried about it for the white community? We're worried for the black community? We're worried about it for everybody. The 310 million guns in this country are not going away.
All right.
Not going away.
Go ahead, Jane.
Hi. I think what Ed is doing and so powerfully is to try to ground this conversation in the reality of data. And black on black crime is without question a real issue. But the data actually is what you alluded to first, that what we have is the vast majority of gun deaths are suicide or accident. The second level is spousal or partner, hugely.
Right.
The third level is family or friend. By the time we get down to these conversations that always loop into crime, we are really talking about a very small percentage of what gun deaths are.
Okay.
And yet we never really have that as a larger American conversation.
Let me just respond to that in a kind of an ugly way. The gun lobby uses what you just said as part of the rationale for why there shouldn't be any gun restrictions. So, for instance, they will not say this on the record, but I've had conversations with Second Amendment absolutists who have said, why does everybody get so upset every time there's a mass killing? It's such a tiny percentage. It's such a minuscule percentage of the number of people who get killed with guns every year.
We're not talking about the number of spousal deaths. We're not talking about the number of personal accidents. We're only talking about these small numbers.
Well, what I would say to that is
it's where we really put our emphasis
No,
of where our numbers are.
I think your answer is very legitimate. I think the statistics, there's the vast majority of people who are killed in America know the person that killed them. And that's a terrible, terrible situation. And maybe, you wouldn't shoot your wife if you didn't have a gun, and maybe she wouldn't shoot you vice versa. She may stick a knife in you or hit you with a. But I'm just simply saying. Listen,
Okay.
If I could change it, if you said to me, we wouldn't have this terrible situation up here. If you could ban all the guns, Ed Rollins, you've elected a couple presidents. Are you going to elect a president that's going to ban all the guns in America? I'll tell you, first of all, I couldn't do that. And secondly, would it be a better place? Would I give up my couple guns because I've never used, don't know where bullets are? Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. It just telling you it ain't going to happen.
Why does it have to be an either or? That's what I'm.
Because it isn't. Well, first of all, how are you going to get the guns back?
I'm talking about why can't you have some common sense measures?
I'm not arguing as common sense measures. I'm just telling you the legislative process today.
Well,
my condemnation. I don't make up the Democratic Party. I don't make up the Republican Party. I'm just simply analyzing what's there. And what's there is basically a very, not necessarily pro-gun, but they're not about to be anti-gun.
Okay.
So we just had an interesting conversation in New Jersey about this that refers. Sorry, refers to spousal abuse or domestic violence, and there was a bill in the state legislature to allow the police to confiscate temporarily the guns of accused domestic abusers against whom restraining orders had been taken. And there was a huge fight. People wrote to their representatives. Some of the Republicans wrote back and said, oh, we can't do that because the guys would have to then pay some $10 fee or something to get their gun back, and that affects their gun rights. But there was enough pressure that the same state representative eventually changed and voted in favor of this law. So I think,
Did the law pass?
even though most of us are not single issue voters, that worked.
Did the law pass, Joe just asked?
It was voted there, so
Okay, we'll check
Well,
it
Chris
out.
Christie's certainly, Chris
just the last
Christie's
I
certainly
went
not
on
going to
vacation.
sign it
No,
into
no,
law.
I mean, first of all, you're dealing with political people. If the mood changed, the environment changed, they'd change. I'm just trying to interpret.
Wait a second. If you got people with, once again, we've got to do something. This has to be the last
Well,
time.
I don't see that movement across the country. That's
You
what I'm trying.
don't?
No, I don't.
And not in an organized way? Is that what you're saying?
Well, an organized way is the only way you're going to get it done.
All right, stand by. Okay, so wait, hold on, Frank.
When there is a movement across the country,
Right.
when every year the police chiefs come to Washington and say, please get us some gun reform,
Right.
when my local friends here, many of whom are hunters, say, why don't they listen to the hunters lobby? Why are we intimidated by what they call the irresponsible lobby when they are the responsible lobby? Nothing's going to change. The cogs in a society's wheels turn well when the responsible are listened to at least as equally as the irresponsible.
Very well said. But please understand, I am not a representative of the Congress.
Okay, no,
Right.
he's reality. He's Mr. Reality. Okay. So,
Well, he is and he isn't.
okay, why isn't he? Why isn't he?
Well,
'Cause I'm on Fox.
there are two issues. First of all, Ed has said several times that you either have to take all the guns away or no,
Yeah,
and I just totally don't agree with that. And second of all, just because we're in a moment now where a problem seems intractable doesn't mean it's going to forever be intractable. It is. It's like when you're in an economic hard time, you're in the depression, you think you're always going to be in the depression. You never think there's going to be a time you come out of it. Or you never think there's going to be a change in policy and gay marriage is suddenly going to be the law of the land after, after being nowheresville as little as 5 or 6 years ago. So, yes, it may not happen in your lifetime. You're absolutely right.
But I'm an old man, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, but you're saying that we could come back here in 20 years for Kent Presents the 20th anniversary, and you're saying to me that you don't think we'll still be having the same conversation? If you had to...
In 20 years, I think there'll be some sanity. I think there'll still be a Second Amendment. I think there'll still be the idea that every American has a right to own a gun, but I also think that there'll be restrictions on gun dealers. I think there's a decent likelihood we'll have universal background checks. I mean, there are too many Americans who, for instance, believe in background checks for this worm not to turn at some point. I don't know how it will, I don't know when it will, but I'm optimistic enough to think that it will happen.
I believe in background checks.
Okay. Well, coming from you published the gun report, which every day tracked the violence across the country, the gun violence across the country. So if you're still optimistic, that's a good sign.
But here's the situation. We just had a couple reservists killed, and now there's a big discussion of let's have the military wear guns 24 hours a day when they're off base. Now, is that a good thing?
No.
No.
Okay. We have a question.
First of all, it's not the role of the Army to do that. They basically protect us elsewhere. But if you're basically taking 600,000 troops that we have here in America, all putting their guns when they're in their civilian life, there's going to be incidents. What do they do if they see a robbery and a 9/11? Do they whip it out and go shoot? They're not law enforcement. They're military.
Okay. Well, I mean, the other issue is that just because you have the idea that having a gun is going to protect you is really not true.
It's better than a rock.
That's a point worth noting.
Rock and a stick.
Okay, he's still talking.
I give up.
No.
Okay, Joe. Okay, but wait a second. That is absolutely true. Most people will tell you. I mean, Joe, go ahead. Try and say it again. That if you have a gun and the self-protection,
the likelihood of somebody being harmed by the fact that you have a gun in your house, rather than you using it to protect yourself from an intruder or something, the odds are much, much higher that someone in your household is the one who will get hurt.
Okay.
I think the name is Bob Corman. I'm a lifelong hunter, grew up rural Wisconsin, live in New York City now, and I have handgun and long gun permits in New York, so I've navigated the bureaucracy. I think the discussion bogs down by the polarization, which I think, Ed, you made the point early on in your comments, that the last comment that Joe, you made was the gun isn't going to protect you. I don't think most of the country gives you the right to make that decision, right? I think there's an awful lot of people that believe that a gun may protect them and that they have a constitutional right to have one. If the discussion wasn't a sort of a veiled attempt that background checks, assault weapon bans, all those things, all of which I support also, a lot of people think that those are veiled attempts. It's a slippery slope to get rid of all the guns, right? That you shouldn't have a gun. A gun isn't going to do you any good. We want to get rid of them. If the discussion shifted to sensible control rather than the elimination of, I think you'd have a lot more support.
Could I respond to that,
Let me
please?
make one more point. Again, lifelong gun owner, not a member of the NRA, never have been. Issues like the assault weapons ban keep me from being a member. But I suspect that there are a multiple of the number of people that are actual members of the NRA that support an awful lot of the issues that the NRA raises.
I think
I
that's
don't think
right.
it's 1.5 million people. I think it may be 10 or 20 or 25.
I just wanted to respond to the slippery slope point that you made. You were right that if it were reframed, that there would potentially be more acceptance of the idea of trying to keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. I agree with that. But I also don't believe, I mean, to me, the NRA and its allies are the ones who really run with the idea that everything is a slippery slope. Maybe it's my perception. Maybe I'm wrong in my perception, but I don't feel that, especially now, after the Supreme Court decision and after the Second Amendment has become so much more widely accepted than it was 20 years ago, I don't think there are a lot of people on the gun control side who are basically saying, you know, we want to do this so eventually we'll take your guns. I don't really think that's
I don't know where that's coming from. I mean,
from the NRA. First of all, the NRA says that, and that's part of the rhetoric. The rhetoric is.
Okay, wait a minute. Wasn't that implicit in Joe's statement? No.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I was saying was that statistically, the chances of when you have a gun in your house, the chances of the person being, when you have a gun in your house, there's a higher likelihood that someone in your house is going to get hurt by it than an intruder.
It's probably true.
It is.
Yeah, it's probably true. It's very small. It's like less than 0.5% of people who basically have handled home invaders with a gun with any success.
And sometimes that is what happens.
Okay.
Press a button.
See, it's so interesting. I felt that I said something very benign about what goes on in the world, and you interpret it as me sort of suggesting that your gun should be taken away. And I think that's part of. I think we've really actually hit on a pressure point here, where the two sides don't understand what the other is saying. And I think that's part of the problem, actually.
Okay.
Hi. First of all, thank you for keeping us all awake at this late hour in the day. The juices are going. I think that part of the problem is that we have let the NRA set the criteria. And so, you know, constantly we're bashing ourselves against the entire Congress, the president. I think maybe we've got an opportunity to take it down. The new word is granular. Get it down to a level. You were talking about restraining orders. Is it possible to do it at either the municipal level or the county level to have some kind of regulation, law, whatever, that if someone has a restraining order against them, you can get simultaneously a warrant to check them for guns? I don't know if that's possible.
Depends on the judge.
Secondly, okay, maybe that's where we start and start building. Secondly, we know who these groups of people are who have the most gun violence. Don't start out with black on black, for God's sake, that is torn with all these other issues. Start out
but it's an issue
with
there,
mental illness where it's known and identified. Public health officials have to know when we have communicable diseases that could be of epidemic proportion. This is not that different. And I think we have to rethink how we're looking to start small and get more specific and then start building on that.
Okay, well, you wrote a column, Joe, about the whole notion of framing this as a public health issue. which the NRA is also opposed to.
I actually don't know what their position. I suppose they are opposed to. I mean, there are two issues there. One is that they're trying to prevent physicians from asking people who they think are troubled whether they have a gun, so they could give them advice about this or talk to them about it, and that's being viewed as a violation of Second Amendment rights. And secondly, as a public health issue, there are success stories, especially in the black community, where organizations are treating gun violence as an epidemic, and they're acting in the same way that you would act if you would try and stop an epidemic. You intervene. You go to potential violent situations and try to diffuse them. You even go to the hospital when someone's been shot to try and persuade their family not to take revenge. These have been successful, but they're very small scale, and they don't at this point seem scalable.
Okay, I'm told that that there's a buzzer that sounds when this is over, which is very intimidating.
3 minutes and 32
oh my God, there's
seconds.
A clock. Okay. Is there anybody? Is there what? No. Oh yeah, I'm over to you. Okay, this is the last question over here, I think, because I have a last question for the panelists. Go ahead. Oh, a reprieve. Okay.
Oh, geez.
Geez, right.
I'm ready to stop in 3 minutes and 12 seconds.
I'm just going to roll back before the gun control considerations to how do you get rid of all the guns that are out there illegally? Because that's the real problem.
You don't. I mean,
you used to in New York arrest them, and that was the whole search and drill. And if you had a gun on you, you got arrested. And don't forget the court side of this. The court. I mean, it's nice to say about the warrants and all the rest of it. The courts are not. Depends on who the court is, and we have a lot of left-wing judges that don't want to basically.
Go ahead.
As a physician who's often asked to sign a concealed permit request for individuals so they may get concealed gun permits, they have a number of psychiatric questions to answer for concealed permit. I never give anyone one without them seeing a psychiatrist, quite frankly, because who knows who really has mental illness or not.
Right.
But if we had something similar just for routine background checks, it may be helpful. Part of the problem we have is certainly the mass murders we have, the school killings, the theater killings, as we just had one in Louisiana a couple of weeks ago where a mental patient got out of the hospital years ago, had been committed, went to a reliable gun store, got a legal permit. There's really no way to keep that from happening without violating patients' privacy laws.
If you want to try and get rid of guns in Louisiana, that's a good place to start.
No, there's no way on earth.
All right. We got a reprieve. Joe, can you handle it for another 5 minutes? Yeah?
Sure.
Okay, good.
You to stand up.
Yes, sir.
No.
Okay, my name is Connery. We can consider gun violence a national menace, but so was widespread tobacco smoking, which was, went on all the time in this country in the 1960s. And there was a widespread acceptance of drunk driving until MAD came along.
Right,
surely we can learn something, or can we learn something? That's the question.
These precedents. My sense is a lot of you in this room are supporting Hillary Clinton. Why don't you go get her to take a stand on this? No, seriously. I mean, it's to what? I could tell you there's no Republican going to take that stand, but certainly if she believes in that, start right there. Make that a part of the campaign.
What did that have to do with the question the guy asked?
Yeah.
I mean,
you're talking about a public campaign.
What lessons can be learned from the tobacco and the drunk driving?
The tobacco lesson is harder. The tobacco lesson is harder because what brought down tobacco ultimately was a massive class action lawsuit brought by 46 of the 50 states. Although people did turn away from smoking. Now, the MAD example is more interesting because what happened was a movement began that changed societal norms. And actually laws followed the change in societal norms. Now, when I did the gun report, one of the things that affected me the most was realizing that almost every day some kid got shot by a brother, a sister, an accident of one sort or another. Of all the gun violence that I saw on the gun report, this seemed like the most preventable. And it requires that kind of movement where societal norms change so that a parent is not afraid to ask another parent, do you have a gun in the house, if you're going to send your kid over there, and is it locked up? And where a societal norm is that you keep your gun under lock and key, 99.9% of the time, except when you're using it. It doesn't seem to me implausible that that could happen. There hasn't really been much of an effort to try and make that happen, but I think that's one way the MAD example could translate to the gun example.
Okay, we haven't even brought up the subject that you can now push 3 buttons and make a gun with 3D printing. And
you know what? The person to ask about that is going to be here tomorrow on stage, and that's Bill Gross, who's about to come out with a $300 3D printer. And so tomorrow at his session, feel free to ask him whether you can actually manufacture a gun with a 3D printer.
But you can.
I think
no,
they can.
You can do it. And then what's going to happen?
Then you can take it
I'm told
on
that
an
the
airplane.
second bullet, it'll just explode in your face.
Okay.
That's what I'm told.
Anybody
but
else?
I don't
We're going
know.
to do last call here. Anybody? Oh.
Mothers Against Driving.
Okay,
it started in Sacramento. A woman in Sacramento
Yes,
got
that's
her
what
child
MAD
killed.
is.
She started lobbying the legislature. She got turned away totally. The first the liquor lobby, everybody else went against her. It became a nationwide movement. It was mothers that made it. They went legislature by legislature across this country. We used to have 55,000 people a year killed by drunk driving. It's substantially down today, and it was a great political movement.
But it's not like we don't have grassroots organizations, Ed. Again, there are people out there. They're just outspent and outnumbered by a lot.
Don't let him answer that, will you?
Okay, never mind. Go ahead. Last question. Go ahead, sir.
Fred Rubenstein. Could you give us a little bit of history how the Second Amendment, which used to be interpreted to require only militias to have guns, got somehow turned into a defense of everybody having guns rather than just militias?
200 years of gun owners. I mean, the early militia may have been very well, but you talk to any historian or what have you, it's been an evolutionary process, and I think to a certain extent, the decision was a 5-4 decision. Maybe the court can someday say this is not what we intended.
This was the Supreme Court decision you're talking about?
I'm telling you, there's several ways to change any constitutional amendment. First and foremost is repeal it.
But it was a 5-4 decision, which means that 4 judges voted.
The change had happened long before the 5-4 decision.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have to.
But it's been.
Okay. Michael Wallman has written a really great book about this that I recommend to everybody. Of course, I've forgotten the title, but I think it's The Second Amendment of History. The critical moment in the modern history of the gun movement was basically a palace coup that took place in the 1970s when the NRA, which had basically been a hunting and very benign organization that actually supported a lot of gun control measures, was overthrown by a group that is represented now by Wayne LaPierre, et cetera. And they began the process of changing the way people thought about the Second Amendment. And they really did a brilliant job.
Okay, but that really is...
So by the time the Supreme Court decision came down, there was more or less a consensus about what the Second Amendment said that was very different from what people had thought 40 or 50 years earlier.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank all of you and for your comment that we kept you awake. I hope that's true. It's a high point of my day, actually. We hope you enjoy the rest of Kent Presents. Give a warm round of applause for Kent. Thank you.
Nice being on the stage with you.
All right, buddy.
Thank you.